Hi, everybody. Welcome to the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Of course, meet me on Twitter at Santita J. Meet me on my YouTube channel, the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Meet the Morning Stars over there. Great conversation. And then Santita Jackson and Friends on Facebook. Everybody, let's talk about election 2024. It is an exciting time, no matter where you fall politically. It is a very, very exciting and interesting time. And a lot of things are changing. A lot of things are being exposed. If you look uh, at television, you can see by the polling by the day, it's just a really volatile electorate. And one of the areas of volatility we're seeing is in the Black voting space. Although many um, Democratic pundits are inclined to deny this, they can't really. It's hard to deny that something is going on with the Black voter. It's hard to deny that, and you see that because in campaigns, and I grew up in them, and they're far more sophisticated now. You do internal polling. You have your internal analytics, and you kind of know where voters are going, where they're heading. There is something called political science. It is a science, everybody. So that having been said, uh, blacks and Hispanics are moving away from the Democratic Party, and there is a panic in the Biden White House about blacks moving away from President Biden because no Democratic president can win without the black vote. You just can't do it. You can't. And yet, we're seeing something that we have not seen really in 60 years. We're seeing uh, Republicans making a play for the black vote. Yeah, that's happening. We can't deny it. They're having coffee clatches and meetings within the black community. You're not hiding as a black Republican anymore. Now more and more people are saying, yeah, this is I like Trump, or I didn't like how he was handled in this trial. I mean, I'm listening to folks. And I want to know what you're thinking, everybody. Call us. Well, you can't call us, but you can certainly reach out to us on at Santita J Twitter, and you can also reach out to me on the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook and on the Santita Jackson Show YouTube channel. Please go there. I want to know what your thoughts are. This Biden-Trump fight for the black vote, is it real? What do you make of it? What do you make of it? What do you make of it? And so let's start. Well, let me start with you, Attorney Darrell Jones, because you, of course, you're the chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition. You are out talking to people all the time, registering people to vote, showing them how to vote. We're going to be doing some work with you really through November so that we can find out, how ex-felons or people who are convicted felons who might be waiting to go to jail. I mean, there's just so much. How do you vote? What happens when you get to the polling place and your name is not there? But that having been said, today we're talking about how people are voting, what their inclinations are now. What are you hearing? Because much is being made of the fact that more and more black men are saying that for various and sundry reasons, they are fed up with the Democratic Party. Do you find that are the polls misleading, or are they onto something?
Well, Santita, I never really trust polls. And never have, and don't know that I ever will. I cannot recall ever going to a voting booth and seeing a poll stand next to me to vote. It just doesn't happen. The information that people receive when they call voters, or potential voters, they may or may not be accurate. So the information that the pollsters have isn't always accurate. But with that being said, we know that coming into this election cycle, that there's not a lot of excitement about either President Trump, nor former President Trump, nor President Biden. I mean, the excitement is not there. And coming out of the African American community, it's no different than any other community, right? The excitement isn't there. But with that being said, There is a lot of talk, particularly among Black men, as to whether or not they are willing to support a President Trump, another term of a President Trump. The
I mean,
thing that
President Biden or President Trump?
if they're willing to support another term of a former President
Oh,
Trump,
former President.
coming back into power. So there's a lot of conversation that's there. But I think the thing that the Biden administration needs to do is they really need to nail down. They need to really emphasize. They really need to educate everyone of what they've done in the African American community. And it's not just the appointment of Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, or the appointment of more African American women on the federal bench than all previous presidents combined, but a lot of the other information that's there that they're not sharing. They have these accomplishments, but if you have all these accomplishments and nobody knows about them, then no one's going to give you credit for them. They're going to see you for what you are. And going into his presidency, people did not support President Biden because they thought he was the best choice, the best person, nor their first choice. What they thought they were getting when they voted for President Biden was not former President Trump. Right? They were tired of those policies. They were tired of all the crazy emails, the crazy what was it, Twitter, all that other stuff, and all the craziness about it. But what President Biden has not done, what the administration has not done, is to raise the flag on all the accomplishments they've done for the African American community. And because they haven't raised that flag, and they continue to this day to not really raise that flag, that the African American male, the African American voter, is lukewarm on the whole voting process and him. And the thing that is concerning, particularly for the Gen Z and the millennial voters, for the Gen Z and the millennial Black voter, African American voter, what they're looking for right now are really, it's not about Gaza, it's not about the environment, it's not about any of those issues. It's about economics. It's about a job. It's about housing security. That's what they're looking for, and those are the issues that the administration has got to address, not simply in the African American Gen Z and millennial community, but to the Gen Z and millennial community overall. When folks talk about the environmental and all the other things that they think Gen Z are concerned about, Gaza, yeah, they're concerned about them, but their top concern is the economy, is their paycheck, is the cost of living, the cost of food, the cost of gas, the cost of getting to work, those types of things. That's even above the reproduction rights. It's above that. So those are the issues that the administration has got to address. And that's not a Black issue. It's a Gen Z and a millennial issue, and an issue for many Americans across the board. So that's what he's facing. The Gaza, the Ukraine, and all of that all factors in. But everything, every reading, every adjustment that we see, every polling that we see, it always puts within the Gen Z and millennial community the economy first and the cost of living.
Dwight McKee, are the polls misleading, or are they telling the truth?
I think they are misinterpreting. I think this election is not about excitement. This election is about resentment from Black people, not excitement. They're not excited about either candidate, but there's a resentment for Biden because the accomplishments are general, but his appeals are specific. Vote for me and I'll set you free. But when they look at the record, the very specific investments have been in people other than his base and the people that put him in office. And so when you look at when Black people that I've talked to or listened to, when they look at what he's done specifically for the Ukrainians, not just in the Ukraine, haven't sent them the money, but when they repatriate the Ukrainians over here and get them jobs, get them work visas, get them housing, get them education. When you look at what he's done for Israel, in terms of arming them and actually giving them more money than they've asked for. When they look at what he's done for Department of Defense, is actually giving them more money than they've asked for. Black people that I've talked to's attitude is, when is it our turn? They look at what they've done for the migrants and bring them over here, and many of them now are in school, have apartments, have work visas, and they've been over here 6 months. And so black people who've been working for free for 250 years and after then was never fully compensated, they look at that other people get such a priority and they are never invested in. And so it creates a resentment.
Mm-hmm.
And so either they are not going to vote for anybody, vote for a third party candidate, or vote for Trump mostly out of resentment, not because they're so excited about Trump, but their thing with Trump is, well, why not? And then they see what they're doing to Trump, and it looks so conspiratorial, and always runs back into my premise that I raised 2 years ago, is don't turn a martyr, turn a monster into a martyr. Then there's some black men that identify with him and think that the reason they're trying to stop him is because they think that he may be much more negotiable and much more transactional than even Biden. And so it's an interesting scenario as we look and see. I agree with Daryl that I think Gaza is, for many of the blacks, not a lot of the young blacks, is kind of a side issue, but it is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
And the economy is a major part of what's going on. And I just think the preponderance of all these issues has created almost a backlash among a lot of black people.
So when you say resentment, what do they resent? I mean, and you know, I think Chicago, Daryl, is very interesting because you've got the migrant crisis writ large. You have little Ukraine in Chicago, which has grown by tens of thousands of people because they've been resettled here, and they've been funded here. There's so much, Dwight, that we're seeing here, and so you have to pay attention to what people are saying on the ground, Daryl, here, because of the things that we're living and seeing. Dwight?
Yeah, and you have to know, they have to know that people are seeing this. And every day you see, the Ukrainians getting the new jobs, and the migrants doing the construction work, and the Europeans building the housing. And black people who've been here for so long has none of the promises, not many of the promises made to them have ever been fulfilled. And so they know that this is not about money. That's the one thing that black people have come to the conclusion of. When they was talking about reparations, they was talking about compensation. The excuse was, we don't have the money, and the money will inflate the economy. And how are we going to pay what we owe? But what they're finding out now is that the money is there if you want the money, for people you think the money that you want to give money to. And that's the resentment, is now they know it was never about money. It was about priorities and value. And so in this, black people feel devalued, and justifiably so. When they see the Ukrainians bust over here, flown over here and set up, and they see the Haitians beaten with whips with people on horses. I mean, at some point you say this cannot be about money. This is about value, who you see as valuable and who you see as valueless. And black people who are as patient as anybody at some point say enough is enough. I mean, I'm just not going to keep being used this way.
So is that what you see when you? Uh, well, let me have you respond to that, Daryl. I mean,
Yeah,
because
no, I agree completely with what Dwight is saying, because when we talk about Ukraine, they start talking about democracy, right? That the reason they want to give all this money is they want to support and be protective of democracy and the
while
building of the
Zelensky won't have elections.
right.
Oh,
Okay, all right, but the money's supposed to be going for democracy. But here at home, for the African American, we're still fighting voting rights. The very democracy that's at here that we're trying to force through so that voting rights are appropriately applied and that all these tricks aren't applying to African Americans. But we don't see the fight on that side. We don't see the investment of the funds on that side. When we talk about the migrant crisis, like Dwight was laying out, when we talk about the migrant crisis, no one has a problem, I don't think, with being helpful and in my world, Christian, to helping people that are coming in with the migrants. The problem comes when you're putting all this money into the migrants that are coming in, and we have all of these unhoused and insecure housed African Americans that are in this community that aren't receiving the same treatment. That's the reason why the resentment that I think that Dwight was mentioning, that's some of the touching stone of what goes on there. So I'm 100% with him on that there is a resentment that's there. Yet at the same time, we've got to wonder what's on the other side of this. Do African Americans now support President Trump? How can you do this? We've got to remember that in 2020, when he was doing all the challenges across the country to the vote, he was going after what? Philadelphia. He was going after Detroit. He was going after Milwaukee. He was going after Atlanta. He was going after all these black voters to not have their votes count. So, you don't like either side necessarily crazy about either Trump or Biden, but I think that when we start looking at the African American community and our dislike of the system initially, that this gives the reason, gives the understanding of the reason why, because we feel as though we're mistreated one way or we're mistreated the other way. The question is, choose your poison. Which one do you want to be mistreated by? There are a lot of positive things that have come from the Biden administration, but by the same token, there are a lot of steps that they're taking that are not necessarily in the interest of the African American community, nor showing that they get it when it comes to voting. And voting is the one thing that would benefit President Biden. And if he would,
why won't he have an executive order on that?
And that's precisely where I was going. The executive order would benefit him because it would encourage and break down all these barriers that they've put up to people being able to access the ability to vote. I can't explain to you why he won't do it.
No, because he just did it. He just put another executive order in place on the migrants, on people seeking asylum. He can do that, but he refuses. He refuses to sign an executive order for the people who he needs to have vote for him. Mm-hmm. And really for all Americans. I mean, what advantages Black people helps everybody. He's refusing. It's not that he's going past it. He's refusing to do that, Daryl. Why?
Yeah, and you're right. He's refusing to do it. I can't give the explanation as the reason why. But if you don't want to do the executive order, then lean in, shoulder in, and push Congress to pass some of the voting rights stuff. He wouldn't even do that. When we were at the front door pushing for voting rights in a favorable Congress and a less than favorable Senate, the administration wasn't there. They were given some lip service, but no real shoulder, no real backbone, no real strength behind it. We need the administration to speak full throat, to put concentration into it. And the executive order, I believe, is the way to go. But if you're afraid of the executive order, lean into it. LBJ knew how to do it, right? He's like, this is what's important to you. This is what you want. You ain't going to get it unless I get what I want. That's the type of strength that we need for voting rights coming out of the White House.
But not just strength, I think intention, right? This, I mean,
Exactly.
this because he had, remember, he has a 50-year record, which if you go on YouTube, if you listen, these talking points are out here now, Daryl.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear young blacks and older ones when I hear them calling into Washington Journal on C-SPAN in the morning. When I look at all of these videos that people have out now, maybe are they being paid for by Republicans? Some, but not all.
Mm-hmm.
And they are going through. Oh, did you know about the police officer's Bill of Rights that he tried to push right after 2 weeks after we all saw the tape of Rodney King being beaten half to death? Do you know about him with supporting Clarence Thomas, burying Anita Hill? I mean, he got a history. Anti-busing, he got a history. Okay, everybody's got a history, but you can go forward, right? We need voting rights now. We need those protections right now. I had Greg Palast on the show about a little more than a week ago. I mean, we are being savaged, but no one's talking about that, Daryl, about voting rights. Voter suppression is very real, and it is happening at a quicker pace. You know this better than anyone. You and Barbara Arnwine are you all the titans in the space.
Mm-hmm.
For all that he's doing, that's what we need. Oh, well, okay. I just, Dwight McKee. Well, no, Daryl, please. I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right on it. And I tell you, the thing that gets me, though, Santita, is this. And most people, most Americans are unaware of the voting issues and the challenges that exist. But one of the things that's been at the president's doorstep, whatever you want to call it, and sitting there is the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. And when the Supreme Court struck down in the Shelby case, the Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act, the pre-clearance provision of the Voting Rights Act, that's when all of this started to come unfold. And you saw states doing all this stuff to make it more difficult for people of color, and particularly Black people and young voters, to be able to vote. The Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act are two legislative pieces that should be pushed through Congress, because it will put back in place the pre-clearance provision. And just to be clear, the pre-clearance provision simply identified that there's a history of voter suppression that occurred, or making it more difficult for Blacks and people of color to vote in certain states, mainly the southern states throughout the country, in order for them to put in legislation, for the states to enact legislation dealing with a person's voting rights, an individual's voting rights, or voting rights in general. It would have to pass pre-clearance through the federal government. The DOJ would look at it to see if it had a disparate impact on Black voters and voters of color. That's what the Supreme Court set aside, and that's what started it on this role of where we are now, where it becomes so difficult for the community of color and Black voters in particular to be able to vote. One of the concerns, Santita, that people have got to be aware of it, and while, again, I always credit President Biden for his appointment of Ketanji Brown Jackson, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. But I also think that we've got to take into consideration what it means if we vote for a former President Trump to be the next president. He appointed 3 Supreme Court justices, Kavanaugh, Comer, and Alito. And when we start looking at the ones that they've appointed and what it's meant, what it has meant for the vote in the United States, is we just had a case that came out of South Carolina where now they're saying that, in fact, that the Black voter has no voting right that a white conservative state legislature is bound to respect, because they've taken them, they crack them, they pull them apart, and they say, in order for you to prevail against us, Black voter, challenging voter, you've got to show that it was our intention, that we have a presumption that what the state legislator did was non-racial. The presumption is that they did it for the good of the state, not that there was some evil intent or racist intent at the beginning, which makes it almost impossible to prove these gerrymandering cases where they're making it difficult for African Americans to elect officials and thus to elect, people on the state and federal level that represent our interests. When we start talking about presidential elections, we've got to understand, it's important that we understand the importance of their appointments and who they appoint on the benches, because it has that type of impact on us on the grassroots level. That's one of those major concerns that we've also got to take into consideration, Santita.
Dwight McKee, what are the objections you're hearing to Biden? As you're talking to young Black men, of course, you're the dean of the Ma'afa Redemption in Chicago, and you've been working with a lot of young people, and you've been talking to a lot of Black men. You've been talking to a lot of people, as you have been over the past 5 decades, and then some. What are the objections you're hearing?
It's not so much young Black men, because they are not that concerned. They are not that involved.
Okay.
It is the veteran voters. And if Biden's logic, his strategy is that you need to work on my plantation because Mr. Charlie beat you with a bigger whip, which is what his logic is Trump is going to be worse than I am, so I don't have to do anything for you, then that's what creates the resentment, because people see that and it makes you angry. Is that you don't think I deserve any benefits because I put my vote on the line for you. Mm-hmm. You think that you deserve the benefits because I'm afraid of the big bad wolf. And so, what Biden's attitude is, if you ain't got to pay to go into the circus, then you save your money for the popcorn. He just takes his money and invests it in other people, particularly other white people or Europeans or whosoever, and assume that Black people are going to follow him because they're afraid of what the option is. And so you start feeling pimped and used and abused. And so your attitude becomes, well, maybe then, maybe I should just run away. I don't have to work on either plantation. Maybe I just run north to see if I can get to Canada or Philadelphia. And that's kind of where we are.
But there's also, Santita, another piece that's to it, I think. And while I agree with Dwight with regards to his Biden analysis, the other part with this election is, it's the choice of two lessers, right? Because neither one is the one that you want, right? But one is the one you can live with perhaps a little better than the other. But more importantly, we've got to encourage people to go to vote because we have Congress that's in play here as well. And so regardless of who wins the presidency, if you can have more representation in Congress, so that you can have control of Congress, you can have some type of check and balance that's on the president that'll be in place. So, it's important that we push to have the African American and the voters of color certainly get out there and vote so that the Congress can be more reflective and open to the issues that are of concern to our community.
Dwight, are people hearing that? The down ballot voting, is there a push for that or no? No.
From Daryl, there's a push from Daryl for that. But there is people, again, they vote bread and butter issues, the economy, jobs, options, inflation. They vote, very directly, or they vote out of again, resentment and their insult level. And I remember in Chicago, and the Democrats had been mistreating us for years. Daily was, our worst enemy, boom, 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 boom. And that went on for about 40, 50 years. Then one day it snowed about 10 inches of snow.
The 79 and
snow
that was 60 inches high.
And the mayor decided that he would have the trains run straight from the white community straight downtown and left black people in the station watching the trains go by.
Mm.
And Negroes who had been violated and abused by Democratic mayors for years and years, they looked at them trains go by and they took that personally and said, he's out of here. And they revolted and threw him out of office because the insult became personal. That's kind of where I see black people around the country is now. The insults are personal. And when you see a president who you voted for, who you put in office, take your money and send it overseas and pay the civil servants and pay the soldiers and pay for weapons in a country 2,000 miles away, and you can't get no relief. You take that personally because that's your money that you see going over to people who you don't even know, who then, when they come over here, walk past you and don't even speak. Look at you with contempt, like you are new to the country and they belong here. I mean, some things you just take personally, and I just think that's where we are.
And so you don't think these polls, I mean, Daryl says he mistrusts the polls, and depending upon how people ask the questions, I hear you. But somehow or another, remember the polls that they used to take with people coming out of the polling place right after an election? They were amazingly accurate until these elections didn't go the way. I mean, no, really, because I have to be honest with you. I have a problem with the computer-driven system because there's so much space for graft. I remember seeing an HBO special some years ago. Well, someone put in Daryl Jones' name and Santita Jackson's name came out, and they showed that special, Daryl, once, and I've not seen it since. It was a documentary. And this white woman who conducted the trial, she just started to cry. She said, if this, and this was like 25 years ago or so, she said, if this is happening to me, what's happening to our system? That does not make me a Republican to question the integrity of the system. Theft of votes is real. And and so much of the rot in the system is being exposed now. I think that's part of the reason I'm grateful to be living in this time, because a lot of things that we whispered about, now they're being said. The quiet part is being said out loud. So so talk to me. I mean, because there is a real resentment out here, Daryl. There really is, and you know what? I have to tell you, I've been hearing people talk about this trial. Black men who get caught up in the system, who are saying, I heard this man say it on TV this morning. He said, what if I need a lawyer, what can I tell him? Of course, I would say him and her. And he said, what am I supposed to tell him? He said, because you know what? If they're going to do this to Trump, what are they going to do to me? I mean, these are the conversations that we're hearing now. I mean, and that's very real. I mean, I think Dwight hadn't thought about it that way before, but a lot of people are taking this taking different things very personally, Daryl, and they're angry. I mean, and they're angry about the rent's too high. I can't afford groceries. These schools are not working. And then you're flooding other countries with all this money, and you won't give me a dime.
And that's at both levels. They see what's happening to Trump, and that looks how contrived a lot of that looks. And then they're looking and say, if I had a gun while I was on crack, I'd be in jail.
Oh,
How,
Yeah.
how do you explain that? I got crack and buying a gun, and I'm still out of jail.
Well, I think now that one's where I'm a little different on that one, because when we're talking about the Hunter Biden situation,
Uh-huh.
you know, I don't think that's a case that should ever have been charged. It's so incredibly rarely charged in the United States that someone is charged because they are in possession of the gun and they happen to be a drug addict, typically, or addicted to drugs, or however you want to put it. Typically, what happens is someone with a gun and drugs at the same time gets charged. Not that you had a gun for 11 days and now they're coming back to charge you for the gun you had for 11 days that was never used.
But Daryl, this case with Trump was settled 7 years ago, and it was a misdemeanor, and then it became a felony. But then the judge said, "Well, okay, if you can't find this to be felonious, you kick it back to being a misdemeanor." I'm saying it's
yeah,
I mean,
well,
because to me, this New York case was about him trying to hide a dalliance, not an affair. And if it were an affair, he's trying. No, he didn't want to talk about it, and he had paid her off, and it seems like he was being blackmailed. And I just, I mean, what?
yeah, I think that a part of it, obviously is the whole affair piece to it, but the larger part that's there, and when they're talking about the misdemeanor and the felony, is that the falsifying business records is the misdemeanor, but when you falsify business records to cover up another crime or in the commission of another crime, that's what elevates it to becoming a felony. And for him, for former President Trump, it was the violation of the New York election laws that kicked it up. Because what he was doing, is that he was trying to cover up the affair, and the whole catch and kill that he had in place with the newspaper there, along with the payments to Stormy Daniel that were not recorded as part of the campaign, because it was clearly part of the campaign, because he was trying to keep it out, because he knew that if the information had gotten out as part of the campaign, that it would have doomed him in Michigan, it would have doomed him in Wisconsin, it would have doomed him in Georgia with those
Daryl,
small percentages.
pardon me. This is what the Inquirer showed up on my mama's front door when my father was days away from leading a march on Tallahassee to stop the theft of the election in 2000. He said, "Do you know that your husband has a child? That's not yours." Okay, that was the Inquirer. He said, "Yes, I do. Would you like to come in and talk about it?" That's how they roll, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's just he just happened to have been friends with David Pecker. So he got cover. We didn't have cover. It's the political game. I mean, that's a joke, really. And and to make this trial about his drug addiction, and fully disclose, we know the Bidens, and they're good people, and Hunter has struggled.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And it breaks my heart because he's someone who is, anyone who struggles like that, they're fragile. So I hate to see this. But then when you're talking to Black people many are struggling, they're addled with drug issues, and nobody's trying to cut them a break. They're putting them in prison.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, if he wants to help his dad, he should say, "You know what? I'm gonna fight for all the brothers out there and the sisters out there who are going through the same thing." He's not doing that. But
But but
his
also
heart is not that
Santita,
political.
the son of the guy that wrote the crime bill. See, that's why I said when Negroes start putting pieces together, then it just don't become disdain, it becomes resentment. So your daddy wrote a crime bill that put 1 million Negroes in jail, mostly for drugs. Now your son is an avowed crack user.
He's sick.
However, he is given grace. And so when you look at your son or your nephew or your stepfather in the joint for 2 ounces of crack
Mm-hmm.
and compare that to Biden, who is based on a bill that your daddy wrote, but you got drugs and a gun and courting prostitutes and you still out going to state dinners. I mean, at what point do you have an insult level, Daryl?
Hmm. Well, I mean, Dwight, I think that you raise a great point with regards to then I guess then Senator Biden being the person that was drafting the bill, and now his son, certainly would have been punished violently, as many African Americans have been behind that bill.
Mm-hmm.
And so when but there's also a point in time when people have experiences and they change, and I think that when President Biden stands by his son, Hunter, who's going through all of the stuff that he's going through right now. That one of the things that I think changes a person is when their child is standing in that courtroom, and they have to stand and confront what they've done. And what their experience has been. And not only that, but to expose it to all the world, because that's what's happening to the Bidens right now.
Then he's come out and saying, and what would help him? Excuse me, and I want you to continue, Daryl. To keep it real in the streets, that he needs to come out and apologize for that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and just say, I was wrong. You know what I did, 30 years ago? Yeah, now I see this differently.
But again, that's not our reality. Our reality was 3 strikes and you're out.
That's
right.
It. Is that still
3 strikes and you're out?
Yeah.
Ain't no forgiveness, ain't no grace, ain't no negotiation. Strike 3, you're out.
And a lot of families were destroyed.
Absolutely. And one of the things that changed a lot of that certainly was the fentanyl crisis, right? Once all of this started really being focused in the white community, all of a sudden they started talking more about the treatment side of this, and how this is a health issue more so than
not a moral one.
Right. Rather than a criminal issue, and we need to seek treatment. We need to figure out how to get them into programs rather than incarceration. And so that's where your incarceration stuff started falling by the wayside when it started becoming heavily weighed into the white community as opposed to just the Black community. When it was just the Black community that was the focus of crack. The 3 strikes you're out. Let's get rid of them. We don't care about the amount of it. All the other stuff was in place. And in all fairness, when you were talking about crack cocaine as opposed to powder cocaine, right? Whites were more inclined to have the powder cocaine because it was more expensive. The treatment there by the courts was less. Was more lenient for those that had the powder than those that were there with the crack. So there's a history that's there with regards to the injustice of the system and who it kept its foot on the neck of, and who was released and was able to breathe. And that's part of what I think Santita, you're referring to when you say there's an apology that's owed, because once you see what you've done to this community and the policies that you've put in place, and you see it now because it's your child that's now before the court, it's your family that's now being impacted. You understand what the laws and what you were supporting previously has done to many families in the African American community.
I don't think that's crossed his mind, though. Honestly, I really don't, because even for them to make this trial about his drug addiction, let's keep it real. I mean, the stories are starting to come out that AI was used to comprise the Trump jury. I'm mad about it, and that's been used to comprise this jury too. And the Trump jury, algorithmically, after everything shook out, they were going to convict him, period. I mean, that's just, it's the unevenness. And, and people on the streets, they smoked it out, Daryl and Dwight. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is my sense of things. When I listen to, the analysis that Black people have out here, and particularly Black men, I'm hearing something else. And I'm just saying, when they keep saying that the polls, Black folks are overwhelmed. First of all, he was the most unpopular candidate in the field 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. Folks wanted him to drop out. He kept saying, no, wait till we get to South Carolina. People were like, wait till you get out of this, man. We don't want you. And then Obama and the Democratic establishment came in and put the kibosh on Elizabeth Warren and Bernie. And this is who we got left. So we get to South Carolina because I was in South Carolina. And what did he do? Well, Jim Clyburn said, he's my guy. I know him. He's got compassion. Oh my gosh, all of that. That's what happened. It's 4 years later. And 8 years after we have lived with Trump. You cannot frighten Black people. We have endured the worst that the country can give out. Look in the mirror. We're all products of a lot of, my mother said, we are evidence of bad behavior. Come on. No, I mean, what?
Mm-hmm.
You can't, you got to come up with something else there, because I do believe that there is a shift. There is a shift, and I mean, and you see it in the Latino community. You see it. There's a shift, and I think if you have cancer, you don't need cold medicine. You need chemo.
Mm-hmm.
And if this is not addressed in the right way, he is going to lose. Biden, that is, because if you look at these gatherings that these Black Republicans are having, they are meeting Black men where they want to be met. We have to keep it 100. That's not what Democrats are doing. They're not, and they're going past Black men, which is a mistake. Oh, Daryl, it's just.
But Santita and Dwight, sometimes it appears to me that they really just don't know how to go to
How can they not know that? All these, half the people who work for him came out of Jackson campaign and worked for Rembering.
But when I look at their actions, I look at what they tried, yet it doesn't appear to me that they're really reaching out to the African American community, that they're speaking to them, but not standing with them, and the ones that they tend to come to a lot of times are those that are the college educated and the professionals and that type of thing, as opposed to the everyday guy, right? And I just don't know that they're after that appeal. And I think that's what many of the Republicans are trying to go to, is that working class, that everyday type of person. And the Democrats, they always get sort of mired down, it seems, in the intellectualism of it all, as opposed to going to the everyday person and just laying it out there. And I just have a feeling that that's sort of what we see happening with the African American community, with the Black men in the community, and the administration's approach to it.
Well, these people might not have book learning, but they sure are smart. Intellectualism can be very dumb.
Yeah.
And what they're doing ain't smart. It's not. And people feel, and I'm just telling you what I'm hearing, they feel that they're being patronized.
Yeah.
And that angers folks. People weren't in love with OJ. OJ had left the Black community in '68. I mean, he wasn't anywhere. He said, "I'm not Black. I'm OJ." He did that.
Mm-hmm.
When the Olympians raised their fists in the air in Mexico City, he did that. I mean, while Muhammad Ali's gonna go to prison to stand up for his beliefs, he was way away from that. But knowing what we knew about the LAPD and police malfeasance, we were no. And wait a minute, you have a Mark Furman, an avowed racist.
Mm-hmm.
He finds droplets of blood. This woman, OJ's wife. I mean, y'all, we only have about 3-4 minutes left here. It was something called it was a killing, a drug killing, where they pull your tongue through your neck.
Mm.
Yeah. It's I forget the name of it, but that's how she and Ron Goldman were killed. That's how, and so when people, this as a lawyer, you have encyclopedias of crimes. So when people walk in crime scenes, you know that this is how this happened. These people committed this crime. You know this. I've got friends who are lawyers, and they say, "Oh no, you can walk in a crime scene and know you can you could make not snap judgments, but you could profile who did this because of how it's done.
Mm-hmm.
But Black folks saw the unfairness in the system, and they said, "No, no, what you're doing, OJ, ain't right." That was, and I think that's what people are seeing here. And I think that if we don't address it, I mean, I've known too many political consultants, Daryl and Dwight, who are now telling folks, okay, when you're campaigning, don't mention the top of the ticket. Democrats. That's what this is like. Don't mention the top of the ticket. Just go on and do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, Dwight, I've got a couple of minutes here before we go. What are your thoughts? What's what's the takeaway? Are we being misled, or are we not paying attention to what's really going on here?
I think the takeaway is Trump will be the president. That's what I think the real takeaway is going to be. And I think it's going to be surprisingly not close
Hmm.
as they think it is. I think that's the story they're supposed to tell, and it's not true. I don't think it's going to be as close as people think it's going to be.
Hmm.
And I don't think Trump is going to be as bad for black people as people think he's going to be, because he's so transactional. And I think that ironically enough, he had some experience is what being a black man was like, as they kick his behind and take his resources and try to put him in jail. I think he creates a different level of empathy with him and black people. So I think because he's a transactional guy rather than a principled guy, I think he may be a little more negotiable than Trump is.
Do you think Trump will be more negotiable than Biden?
Than Biden, correct.
Even with what's happening with Biden, what's happening with his son right now?
Yep. Yep.
Daryl, I got 30 seconds for you.
You know, I don't see a Trump victory. And I tell you, the reason I don't see a Trump victory is because I think there are a lot of conservatives that are not going to vote for Trump.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't think that his base is as large as many people believe that it is. And I think that, you know, ultimately, many of the African Americans, while the numbers won't be as great, that the African American vote is still going to overwhelmingly support President Biden. So I don't see Trump overcoming it, and I see him losing with the independent voters as well as some of his conservatives.
Well, you know what? I tell you, no matter what, I hope that people will vote. Please vote, and vote with a passion. And Daryl, you will be back on the show next week talking about the questions we need to answer some questions about what happens if you've been in jail, if you're awaiting jail, if you've been arrested. I mean, all of these things, because people are being turned away from the polls, or they don't even bother going because they don't think they have the right. How do you check and see if your voting rights have been restored, if your full citizenship has been restored? There are so many issues. And if you have to challenge the judge after you've gotten the right information, how do you do it? What do you do? I mean, it's all of these things that we need to talk about. But you know, I tell you what, everybody, pay attention, and I hope that the conversation today is helping you to think a bit. I have had two of the most brilliant minds that I could think of who were here, and I'm so glad that you were here, Attorney Daryl Jones, Chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition. I'm so glad that you were here, Dwight McKee, of course. I should have said this at the top. Senior advisor to Cornel West, Dr. Cornel West, but also the Rainbow Push International Conference. I want you to be a part of it. Go to rainbowpush.org. We're having these convention meetings. In fact, they're having one right now. And we want you to be involved. The 13th through the 17th of August. And Daryl, we got to figure out what you're going to do at that convention because we got a lot of work to do as we lead into the Democratic Convention. As we lean into the Democratic Convention, as people are going to be expressing themselves, and I want you to talk about that next week, how that's going to work. Because C.K. Hoffler did say, first thing they've got to do if they're going to protest, they have to lawyer up.
Mm-hmm.
And because let me tell you, they're coming after these protesters with a vengeance, denying them their degrees, denying them jobs. It's a serious thing. It's a serious thing. I love you, everybody. Can't wait to be with you next week. Well, actually, Keep Hope Alive on Sunday. How about that? That's right. Go to the iHeart Network so that you can see Keep Hope Alive, see and hear Keep Hope Alive with Reverend Jesse Jackson. Until Monday, everybody, AM 950 Radio, I love you. And God bless you. I'm Santita Jackson.